The steam hit me like a confession I wasn't ready to hear. Thick and suffocating. As I stepped into the sauna behind Ryan. His broad shoulders, slick with sweat, moved with the ease of someone who owned every room he entered. Even this Oni cedar-scented haze in the middle of nowhere. Oregon. My heart pounded. Not just from the heat, but from the weight of what I'd been hiding for years. I'd known Ryan since we were kids. Two boys chasing fireflies in backyards, unaware of how time would twist our paths. Back then, he was just my best friend. The guy who'd sneak me extra cookies from his mom's kitchen. Now, at 28, he was still that guy, blonde. Charming. Effortlessly straight. The kind of man who could make anyone laugh without trying. I, on the other hand, was Ethan. The quiet one. The one who'd come out at 19 and spent the last decade wrestling with feelings I could never voice. Not to him. This retreat was his idea weekend to unplug. He'd said, grinning over a beer at our favorite Portland dive bar. Just you, me, and a whole lot of nothing. He'd promised. I'd agreed, ignoring the warning bells in my head. Because saying no to Ryan felt like betraying the only piece of home I still had. So here we were, in a remote wellness center, surrounded by pine trees and silence, about to share a sauna that felt more like a crucible than a place to relax. Man, this heat's intense, Ryan said, tossing a towel over the bench and sitting down, his voice cutting through the hiss of steam. He leaned back, eyes half closed, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I sat opposite, my towel tied around my waist, trying to focus on the wood grain instead of the way his skin glistened under the dim light. We'd been friends for 20 years, but I'd loved him for half that time. It wasn't just a crush, it was a slow, aching burn, the kind that made every shared laugh feel like a knife twisting deeper. I'd watched him date women, cheer for him at his college football games, and nod along as he planned a future that didn't include me. Not the way I wanted. And yet, I stayed. Because losing him entirely would have been worse. You okay? F. His voice snapped me back. He was looking at me now, blue eyes sharp despite the haze. You're quiet. Even for you. I forced a laugh. The sound brittle. Just feeling the heat. He grinned. Oblivious. Yeah. It's like we're cooking in here. Bet I could fry an egg on my abs. He patted his stomach. And I looked away, my face burning for reasons that had nothing to do with the sauna. The silence stretched, heavy as the air. I wanted to tell him. I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times late nights staring at my ceiling. Words tumbling over each other like a bad script. Ryan, I'm in love with you. I've always been in love with you. But every time I got close, fear clamped down. What if he laughed? What if he walked away? What if the one person who'd always been there disappeared? Remember that summer at Lake Oswego? He said suddenly, his voice softer now. When we tried to build that raft and it sank in. Like 10 seconds. I smiled despite myself. Yeah. You blamed me for the shoddy nails. They were shoddy. He shot back, laughing. But we had fun, didn't we? Just us. His words hung there. And for a moment, I let myself believe they meant more. That maybe this sauna, this retreat, was his way of saying something he couldn't say in the real world. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and risked a glance at him. He was watching me, his expression unreadable, and my pulse spiked. Ryan, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. The words were there, teetering on the edge. But before I could push them out, he stood up, stretching. Gonna grab some water. You want some? He asked, already halfway to the door. The moment shattered. Yeah, I managed, my voice hollow. Sure. He stepped out, leaving me alone in the steam, my confession dissolving into the heat. I closed my eyes, cursing myself. This was Ryan's straight best friend, the guy who'd never see me the way I saw him. But as the door clicked shut, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, that this sauna was about to change everything. The sauna door creaked open again, and Ryan returned, 2 bottles of water in hand. The steam swirled around him like a halo, and I hated how my heart leapt at the sight. He tossed me a bottle, the cold plastic a shock against my overheated skin, and sat closer this time, too close. Maybe. His knee brushing mine as he settled in. "You didn't answer my question earlier," he said, cracking open his bottle. "You okay? You've been off all weekend." I took a long sip, stalling. The truth was clawing at my throat. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Just tired. I lied, forcing a smile. "Work's been a lot." He nodded, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Ryan had this way of seeing through people, like he could spot a lie from a mile away. It was part of what made him so magnetic and so terrifying. "Bullshit," he said, his tone light but pointed. "You've been weird since we got here. Spill it." My stomach twisted. I could have laughed it off, changed the subject like I always did. But something in his voice, in the way he leaned toward me, made me pause. The sauna felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the heat pressing against my resolve. "It's nothing," I said, but my voice cracked, betraying me. I stared at the floor, at the beads of sweat pooling between my feet. "Just stuff I'm working through." He didn't push, but he didn't look away either. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" he said, softer now. "I mean, we're us. Always have been." The words hit harder than they should have. Us. That single syllable carried a lifetime of memories: bike rides through suburban streets, late night talks about nothing and everything, the way he'd hugged me when I came out. No hesitation, just acceptance. But us had limits, ones he didn't even know existed. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Yeah, I know." He leaned back, the bench creaking under his weight. "This place is supposed to be all about clarity or some shit, right? That's what the brochure said. So maybe it's time to get clear." I froze. Was he talking about me? About himself? My mind raced, grasping for meaning in his words. But before I could respond, he stood again, restless. "I'm gonna crank the heat. You cool with that?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. He tossed more water on the rocks, and the steam roared, filling the room with a thick, blinding fog. It was like the universe was giving me cover, a chance to hide. But hiding was all I'd ever done. As the heat intensified, so did the pressure inside me. I thought about the years I'd spent watching him from the sidelines, cheering for his victories, nursing my own quiet heartbreak. I thought about the nights I'd spent wondering what it would be like to tell him, to lay it all bare and let the chips fall. And I thought about this moment, this sauna, this impossible space where the truth felt closer than ever. "Ryan," I said again, my voice steadier this time. He turned, his silhouette sharp against the steam. "There's something I need to tell you." His eyebrows shot up, but he didn't interrupt. He just waited, his expression open, unguarded. It was the kind of look that made you want to spill your soul, even if it meant breaking your own heart. The words caught, tangled in years of fear. I took a breath, the air scalding my lungs. "I've been in love with you. For a long time." The silence that followed was deafening. The hiss of the sauna rocks, the drip of condensation, the thud of my own pulsite all faded into nothing. Ryan didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me, his face a mask I couldn't read. For the first time in 20 years. I had no idea what he was thinking. F, he said finally, his voice low. Careful. You. What? I swallowed. My throat dry despite the humidity. I love you. Not just as a friend. I've tried to stop, but I can't. And I needed you to know. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly. The seconds stretched, each one a lifetime. I braced for the worst anger. Rejection. The end of everything. But when he looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were something else. Confused. Maybe. Or curious. Or both. Jesus. Ethan. He said, running a hand through his damp hair. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said quickly, my voice shaking. I couldn't keep it in anymore. He nodded slowly, like he was processing something too big to grasp. Then, to my surprise, he laughed a soft, disbelieving sound. You've always been braver than me. You know that. I blinked, caught off guard. What? Telling the truth like that takes guts. He looked at me, his expression softer now, but still unreadable. I need some time to think about this. Okay. I nodded, my heart sinking but not breaking. Not yet. Yeah. Okay. He stood, grabbing his towel. I'm gonna step out for a bit. Clear my head. You good? I wasn't, but I nodded again. Yeah. I'm good. As the door closed behind him, the steam settled, and I was alone again, my confession echoing in the empty space. I'd done it. I'd said the words I'd buried for a decade. But what came next was anyone's guess. The sauna felt colder without him, even as the heat pressed down. I sat there, staring at the cedar walls, replaying every word I'd said. The confession had been a release, but it came with a new weight uncertainty, sharp and relentless, cutting deeper than the fear I'd carried for years. I left the sauna not long after. The cool night air a shock against my skin as I stepped outside. The retreat was quiet. The only sounds the rustle of pine needles and the distant hum of crickets. Ryan was nowhere in sight. I checked the cabin we were sharing, the communal lounge, even the trailhead where he liked to wander when he needed to think. Nothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from him. Need some space. Back soon. My stomach dropped. Space was what I'd feared most. The first step toward losing him. I typed a reply, okay. Take your time, but didn't hit send. Instead, I shoved the phone back in my pocket and headed to the cabin, the weight of the night settling over me. Inside, the cabin was all exposed beams and flannel blankets, a cozy contrast to the storm in my head. I sank onto the couch, staring at the unlit fireplace. Memories flooded in, Ryan teaching me to throw a spiral in high school. The two of us sneaking into a concert we couldn't afford. The way he'd looked at me when I told him I was gay. His hug fierce and unwavering. Doesn't change a thing, he'd said back then. But this changed everything. I must have dozed off. Because the next thing I knew, the cabin door creaked open. Ryan stood there, his hair damp from the night air, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything at first, just kicked off his boots and sat on the opposite end of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. You're back, I said, my voice hoarse. Yeah. He glanced at me, then away. Sorry for bailing like that. I just needed to walk. I nodded, bracing myself. It's okay. I get it. He exhaled, long and slow. No, you don't. I don't even get it. He leaned forward, his voice low. What you said in there, It's a lot. Ethan. I mean, I had no idea. I know, I said, my throat tight. I didn't want you to know, but I couldn't keep pretending. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. His blue eyes searching mine. How long? I swallowed. Since we were 18. Maybe longer. Jesus. He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture I knew meant he was overwhelmed. That's half our lives. Man. Yeah. I forced a weak smile. It's been a ride. He didn't laugh. Just kept staring at the floor. I don't know what to do with this. I mean, you're my best friend. You're your family. But this. I'm not. You don't have to be anything. I cut in. My voice sharper than I meant. I'm not asking you to feel the same. I just needed you to know. He nodded. But the silence that followed was heavy. Like the air before a storm. I don't want to lose you, he said finally. His voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how to navigate this. My heart ached. But there was something in his words. Something raw and honest. That gave me hope. Not for us. Maybe. But for him. For the friendship we'd built over 2 decades. We'll figure it out, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. We always do. He looked at me then. A small smile tugging at his lips. Yeah. We do. The rest of the night passed in a blur of small talk. Both of us tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. We ate cold pizza from the retreat's kitchen, watched half a movie on my laptop, and pretended everything was normal. But it wasn't. The confession had cracked something open, and no amount of banter could seal it shut again. The next morning, Ryan suggested a hike. His voice too bright, like he was trying to outrun the tension. I agreed, grateful for the distraction. The trail wound through towering pines. The air crisp and sharp with the scent of sap. We walked in silence at first. The crunch of gravel under our boots the only sound. You ever think about what we'd be doing if we hadn't met? He asked suddenly. His voice casual, but his eyes fixed on the path ahead. I shrugged. Probably be a lot lonelier. He laughed. A real laugh this time. And for a moment, it felt like old times. Yeah. Same. We reached a clearing. A small overlook with a view of the valley below. All rolling green and morning mist. Ryan stopped. His hands in his pockets. Staring out at the horizon. I'm glad you told me, he said. His voice quiet. Even if it's messy. Even if I don't know what it means yet. I nodded. My chest tight. Me too. He turned to me. His expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Let's just keep going. Okay. You and me. It wasn't a promise of more. But it was enough. For now, it was enough. The hike back to the retreat was quieter. But the silence felt different now, less like a wall, and more like a bridge we were both trying to cross. Ryan walked a step ahead. His shoulders relaxed. But I could tell his mind was still turning over what I'd said. I was too. Wondering if I'd broken something irreparable, or if we could rebuild it into something new. Back at the cabin, we fell into our old rhythm-cracking jokes, arguing over who'd eaten the last slice of pizza. But there was an undercurrent, a new awareness in the way he looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. It was unsettling, but it wasn't bad. Not yet. That afternoon, the retreat offered a group meditation session, and Ryan, to my surprise, suggested we go. Might help us, I dunno. Process, he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. I agreed, mostly because I didn't know how to say no to him. Not after everything. The meditation room was all soft lighting and sandalwood incense, with cushions scattered across the floor. We sat side by side, cross-legged. as the instructor guided us to find our center. I tried to focus on my breathing, but all I could think about was Ryan next to me, his knee inches from mine, his presence a gravity I couldn't escape. "Close your eyes," the instructor said, her voice smooth as river stones. "Let go of what's weighing you down." I tried. God, I tried. But letting go of Ryan felt like letting go of myself. I glanced at him. His eyes closed, his face calm in a way I rarely saw. He looked at peace. And for a moment, I envied him, the ease with which he moved through the world, never questioning his place in it. After the session, we lingered in the room, the other participants drifting out. Ryan stretched, his shirt riding up just enough to show a sliver of skin. I looked away, my face warm. "That was weirdly nice," he said, grinning. "You feel anything?" "Yeah," I said, too quickly. I mean, it was calming. He raised an eyebrow, catching the hitch in my voice. "You sure that's all?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You're gonna make me regret telling you, aren't you?" "Nah," he said, his grin softening. "I'm just trying to figure this out. You know." I nodded, my throat tight. "Me too." That night, we sat on the cabin's porch, the stars sharp against the black sky. Ryan cracked open a beer, passing me one without asking. We clinked bottles, the sound sharp in the quiet. "To figuring shit out," he said, his voice light but his eyes serious. "To figuring shit out," I echoed, my heart pounding. We talked for hours about college, about the time he crashed his dad's car, about the dreams we'd had as kids. It was easy, familiar, but there was something new in it, a current of honesty we hadn't touched before. He didn't bring up my confession, and I didn't either, but it was there, a silent guest in every pause. As the night wore on, the air grew colder, and we moved inside, sprawling on the couch with a blanket thrown over us. Ryan fell asleep first, his head tipped back, his breathing slow and steady. I watched him. The lines of his face softened in sleep, and felt a pang of something I couldn't name love. Yes, but also gratitude, for the fact that he was still here, still my friend, even after everything. The next morning, he was up before me, making coffee in the cabin's tiny kitchen. "You sleep okay?" he asked, handing me a mug. "Yeah," I lied, though the truth was I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every moment of the last 2 days. He leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice careful, "about what you said. And I don't know what it means for me, but I know I don't want to lose you. Not ever." My heart stuttered. "You won't," I said, and I meant it. No matter what. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Good. 'Cause you're stuck with me." We laughed, and for the first time since the sauna, it felt real. But as we packed up to leave the retreat, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something bigger, something neither of us was ready to name. The drive back to Portland was quiet, the hum of the car's engine filling the space where words should have been. Ryan drove, his hands steady on the wheel, while I stared out the window, watching the pines blur into green streaks. We'd left the retreat behind, but the weight of my confession followed us, heavy as the Oregon rain clouds gathering overhead. Back in the city, life tried to snap back to normal. Ryan went to his job at the brewery. I went to mine at the graphic design firm. And we texted like we always had, memes, dumb jokes, plans for the next hangout. But something had shifted. His texts were shorter, more careful, and when we met up for drinks a week later, there was a new distance in his eyes, like he was holding something back. "You good?" I asked, swirling my beer, trying to keep my voice light. Yeah, he said. Too quick. Just busy. I didn't push, but the lie hung between us. I wondered if he was avoiding me, if the sauna had been a mistake I couldn't undo. But then he invited me to a game night at his apartment, and I clung to the hope that we could find our way back to what we'd been. His place was the same as always, cluttered with vinyl records and half-read books, the air smelling of coffee and cedar. A few of our old college friends were there, laughing and arguing over a board game. Ryan was his usual charming self, but I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. As the night wound down, the others left, and it was just us, cleaning up empty bottles and pizza boxes. You didn't have to stay, he said, tossing a rag into the sink. Wanted to, I said, stacking plates. Missed this. He paused, leaning against the counter. Me too. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, what he'd been thinking since the sauna, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, "You ever gonna tell me what's going on in that head of yours?" He laughed, but it was strained. You don't want to know? Try me, I said, my heart pounding. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But he just shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're relentless. You know that. Learn from the best. I shot back, and he laughed again, the tension easing but not breaking. The weeks that followed were a dance of almosts. We hung out. We talked. We laughed. But there was always something unspoken, a question neither of us dared to ask. I started to wonder if I'd misread him, if the sauna had been a one-sided moment, my own hopes projected onto his silence. Then, one night, he called me at 2 a.m. His voice was rough, like he'd been drinking. Can you come over? I was there in 20 minutes, my heart in my throat. His apartment was dark, the only light coming from a lamp in the corner. He was on the couch, a beer in hand, his eyes red-rimmed. You okay? I asked, sitting beside him. He shook his head. I don't know. Man, I've been thinking about what you said. About you. My breath caught. And he looked at me, his expression raw, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I don't know what I feel, but I know it's something, and it scares the shit out of me. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, letting his words settle. He wasn't saying he loved me, but he wasn't saying he didn't, either. For the first time, I saw a crack in the wall he'd built around himself, a glimpse of something real. I'm not going anywhere, I said finally, my voice steady. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. He nodded, his shoulders sagging with relief. Yeah. Okay. We sat there in silence, the weight of the moment heavy but not unbearable. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, even if we didn't know what the next chapter held. The next few months were a blur of tentative steps and unspoken questions. Ryan and I fell back into our routines, but there was a new rhythm to our friendship, one that felt fragile but alive. We didn't talk about the sauna or his late-night confession, but it was there in the way he lingered when we said goodbye, in the way his hand brushed mine when he passed me a beer. I tried to give him space, to let him come to terms with whatever he was feeling, but it wasn't easy. Every smile, every laugh, felt like a lifeline and a landmine all at once. I started dating again, hoping to distract myself, but no one compared to him. No one ever had. One evening, he invited me to a concert at a small venue downtown, some indie band we'd both liked in college. The crowd was thick, the music loud, and for a few hours, it felt like we were 19 again, carefree and untouchable. We stood close, our shoulders brushing, and when the band played a slow song, he didn't pull away. Afterward, we walked through the city, the streets slick with rain. He was quieter than usual, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You ever wonder what we're doing?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. "All the time," I said, my heart racing. "You?" He stopped walking, turning to face me. The streetlights cast shadows across his face, making him look older, more serious. "I don't know what I want," he said, "but I know I don't want to lose this. Us." I nodded, my throat tight. "Me neither." He stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me, and my heart stopped. But he just reached out, his hand resting on my shoulder, heavy and warm. "You're my best friend, Ethan," he said, his voice rough. "That's not going to change." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something. A promise, maybe, that we'd keep navigating this together, no matter how messy it got. Back at his apartment, we sat on the couch, the silence comfortable for the first time in weeks. He put on a record, some old folk song that felt like it belonged to another era. "You know," he said, leaning back, "I've been thinking about what you said, about loving me." I froze, my heart in my throat. "Yeah?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "It's a lot, but it's not bad. It's just new." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened, letting him talk. He told me about the confusion he'd been grappling with, the questions he didn't have answers to. He wasn't sure if he could love me the way I loved him, but he knew he cared about me more than anyone else in his life. "That's enough," I said, and I meant it. "For now, that's enough." He smiled, a real smile, and for the first time, I felt like we were building something new, something stronger than what we'd had before. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust, and that was a start. As the weeks turned into months, we kept moving forward, one step at a time. We went on more hikes, shared more late-night talks, and slowly, the distance between us shrank. I didn't know where we'd end up, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. Spring came to Portland, and with it, a sense of renewal. Ryan and I were closer than ever, but there was still a line we hadn't crossed, a question we hadn't answered. I'd made peace with that, or at least I told myself I had. Loving him was enough, even if it wasn't the kind of love I'd dreamed of. One Saturday, he suggested we drive to the coast, to Cannon Beach, where we'd gone as kids with our families. The drive was long, the road winding through forests and past small towns. But it felt like a pilgrimage, a return to something fundamental. We barely spoke, the radio filling the silence with old rock songs. When we reached the beach, the wind was sharp, the waves crashing against the rocks. Haystack Rock loomed in the distance, a monolith against the gray sky. We walked along the shore, our shoes sinking into the wet sand. And for a while, it was just us and the ocean. "You ever think about the future?" Ryan asked, his voice almost lost in the wind. "Sometimes," I said, kicking at a piece of driftwood. "You?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I used to think I had it all figured out. Job, wife, kids, the whole deal. But now, I don't know." I glanced at him, my heart racing. What changed? He stopped walking, turning to face me. "You did." My breath caught. He stepped closer, his hands still in his pockets, his expression raw and unguarded. "I don't know if I'm like you," he said, his voice steady despite the wind. "But I know I care about you. More than I've ever cared about anyone." I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, the waves crashing around us. He reached out, his hand brushing mine, and for a moment, I thought he might pull away. But he didn't. He laced his fingers with mine, tentative but firm, and my heart stopped. "Ryan," I said, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what this means," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "But I want to find out. With you." It wasn't a kiss, wasn't a confession of love, but it was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. We stood there, hand in hand, the ocean roaring around us. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same side of the line. The rest of the day was quiet, but it was a good quiet, the kind that comes from understanding. We built a fire on the beach, ate sandwiches from a cooler, and talked about nothing and everything. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Back in Portland, life settled into a new normal. Ryan and I didn't put a label on what we were, but we didn't need to. We were us, closer, stronger, more honest than we'd ever been. We went on dates, though we didn't call them that, sharing dinners and long walks through the city. Sometimes he'd hold my hand, sometimes he wouldn't, but every touch felt like a victory, a step toward something real. One night, months after the sauna, we were at his apartment, sprawled on the couch with a movie neither of us was watching. He turned to me, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us." My heart skipped. "Yeah?" He nodded, his hand finding mine. "I don't know if I'm gay or bi or whatever, but I know I love you. Not just as a friend. As more." The words hit me like a wave, washing away years of doubt and fear. I leaned in, and this time, he didn't pull away. Our lips met, tentative at first, then sure, and it was like the world clicked into place. It wasn't perfect, wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. The months that followed were a journey of their own. Ryan came out to his family, to our friends, navigating the questions and the confusion with a courage I hadn't expected. There were hard days, days when he doubted himself, when the weight of his old life pressed down. But we faced them together, building something new, something honest. One evening, as we sat on his balcony, the city lights sparkling below, he turned to me, his smile soft. "You changed everything. You know," he said. "That day in the sauna, it was like you woke me up." I laughed, my heart full. "You're the one who invited me in." He grinned, pulling me close. "Best decision I ever made." Our story wasn't over. There were still questions, still challenges ahead. But as I looked at him, his face lit by the glow of the city, I knew we'd face them together. The sauna had been the start, a moment of truth that cracked us open. What we'd built since was stronger, truer, a testament to the power of honesty, of love, of taking a chance on something real. And that, I realized, was everything.